Now, the third is, and I've alluded to this already, the value proposition is shifting from managing assets to planning. I think you know that. I think most of you realize. But what are the implications of that? Well, when someone sits down with you, you don't lead with a portfolio. I myself have had an experience where I went to a financial planner, and the financial planner immediately buried his nose in my performance statements, and I said, well, I need advice on this and that. And I was very gently but firmly led back to the portfolio and told that they need to manage this portfolio and we need to transfer it over. And I said, well, really what I want to do is get financial advice, and I never got it. It was all about the portfolio. And that will not be a winning formula for Gen X and Gen Y. For one thing, they're extremely skeptical that you can add value by portfolio management. And I'm not saying you can't. I think some of you can. But to address that skepticism, I'll say it another way. When I do presentations, and I go all around the country, and I ask audiences, I say, how many of you are confident that you're adding value with your portfolio management activities? How many of you are confident that there's alpha that your clients are getting as a result of your portfolio management activities? And, there'll be 1,000 people in the room. I'll get 2 hands going up. And I have no doubt those 2 people are adding alpha to their client relationships. And then I say, how many of you are confident that you're adding value to your clients' lives with your financial planning advice and adding value over and above what they would get on their own? Every hand goes up, every single hand. And so I say, well, where is your value proposition? What does that tell you about where your value proposition is? So I think the model is going to be organizing people's financial lives online. We've got a number of programs that do that right now. eMoney is kind of the initial, but there's a program called Asset Map now, and Everplans does the same thing. There's a new program called Circle Black, program called Future Vault. There's a lot of software that's coming out right now that will organize somebody's entire financial life right there online. And then you're coaching them, you're giving them advice on how to handle their assets, if that makes sense. And some of this, of course, is telling them not to sell in a panic when there's a bear market, and you probably have heard it here first. There will be a bear market sooner or later. And some of it will be just coaching them. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? How can I help you? And using the wisdom that you've gathered from working with other successful people. So what I would do, I would start with, and I think this is really important, having a collaborative onboarding process, and that means the initial financial plan. And I say here on the slide, the Mackey-McNeil model. I think her model is the best I've seen so far, so I'll give you some idea of what that is. But the gist of it is people are willing to pay for an experience, and they're more willing to pay for an experience than for advice. And so what you do, how it works is, well, I'll go back, and I'll just give you the gist of it. What Mackey does is she sits people down and she says, let's get to know each other, first meeting, and then I'd like to know, what does prosperity mean to you? And they give an answer. And she types the answer, and it goes right up on a big PowerPoint board on a screen that looks somewhat like what you see on the screen here. And the clients will look at it, and they'll say, yeah, that's sort of what I mean, but can I change it? And I would advise everybody to stop right there and consider, what does that mean when they ask permission to change their own definition of prosperity? Think of where the power is in a relationship when people walk into your office. They're expecting you to tell them what they want. And you've got to turn that around. If you don't turn that around, they're going to be uncomfortable, they're going to be unhappy, they're not going to buy into the plan. So providing the experience. So to give you the answer, yes, you should give them permission to make that change, in case anybody's wondering about what to do about that. And you go through an iterative process. They're sent home, the clients are sent home, and they're told, come up with a list of your most important goals and bring those in. And if it's a husband and wife, do it separately. And they do this, and they come back in, and the first time they see each other's goals is when they're typed up on the screen again. And the most expensive, if there's two overlapping goals, if there's one goal that's this and another goal that's that, the more expensive one goes up on the screen. Nobody gets left out in this process. And of course, the clients look at it and they say, that's not exactly what I meant. Can I change that? And you let them change it, and you go through this iterative process where they're allowed to keep getting closer and closer to a clear articulation of what they want. And then she asks in that second meeting, well, what do you think this is going to cost? And they give an answer, and she types it in. Now, most of you are, choking on that idea because it's not an accurate number, right? The clients just came up with that. But that's fine. For now, Mackie just simply writes down how much that'll cost. And at the end of that second meeting, she goes online. She has an associate go online with the clients, and they use an account aggregation process to bring in their current assets and liabilities. And that's the information that goes into the financial plan along with these estimated costs of the various goals. And the third time they come in, there's a quick and dirty financial plan waiting for them. And actually, she has three plans. One plan is the basic plan. One is a stretch plan of, if you had everything, you'd get this. And one is kind of in the middle. And the basic plan will pay for expenses and make sure you're not eating cat food in retirement. And the stretch plan, if you will, is the one where you're taking 2 trips to Europe and you're buying a new car every couple of years or whatever. It's just taking everything at face value. And raise your hand if you have done a financial plan with your clients and they weren't able to afford everything that was on their list. Okay, pretty much every hand is up, as near as I can see from looking at the screen. So most of you didn't realize that we have cameras in your office, but we're watching you carefully. So what happens is typically the client will not be able to afford everything. And then they realize, this is a good time for me to actually know what it costs to buy that house in Florida, to take those trips to Europe. Because if I don't actually know what that number is, I can't really determine whether I can afford this retirement that I've laid out. So it's a great way to have clients realize the importance of actually getting accurate numbers. So after that third meeting, and very importantly, in that third meeting, they will actually take the mouse and play with it. They'll say, what happens if I retire 2 years later? What happens if I invest $100 more a month between now and retirement? What happens if... So they get a chance to make a bargain with the future. But, of course, they're not yet playing with an accurate set of numbers. And so their next assignment is to go home and research how much does that house cost and how important is that house? And can you rent houses, which, for a vacation? Maybe you take one vacation, not 2. So they come back the fourth meeting with accurate numbers, and they do the same thing. They take the mouse and they make their bargain with the future. They figure out what they can afford. And, of course, it's possible they'll be able to afford more if we continue to get this bull market going, but it's based on reasonable assumptions. They make a bargain with what they think they can have. And throughout this process, they've been discovering what it is they really want out of life. It's a fun experience. And I also think that, what we're going to have in the future is online access to their financial information, which is, I think, a huge part of the value. Live update to their performance, which is automatically generated, and a living, automatically updated financial plan. So they can go anytime they want. They can go online and see what that financial plan looks like. And I also think the performance statement of the future is going to be list your goals. Give me your goals, and it could be as many as 30 goals. And collect them in your CRM. I hope all of you have a CRM. And then each time you meet with your clients, once a year, once a quarter, you go over, have you achieved these goals? And your job is to coach them to achieve as many of them as they can. And the interesting thing about these goals is that most of them won't achieve these goals unless you nag them. I've underlined it here at the bottom of this slide, but this is important. This is a fundamental part of your relationship. They'll do it for you, even if they won't do it for themselves. They'll do it for you, even if they won't do it for themselves. So remember how much power you have in this relationship. So a couple of implications of this particular trend is on the left you see the way that clients see the initial process, the onboarding process. They see you as, it's been compared to, the financial planning process has been compared to undergoing a root canal. I have to dig into all my performance statements. The advisor talks to me about things that are uncomfortable and unpleasant, how I've handled my finances. Maybe I've made a number of mistakes. And so I've asked people, did you get value out of your financial planning relationship? And they said, yes, absolutely. And I said, okay, would you recommend your financial planner to your friends and neighbors? No, I wouldn't. And I don't know if any of you noticed, there's a disconnect between those two. And I'd say, well, there seems to be this disconnect. Why? And they said, because it was such an unpleasant experience to go through the initial planning process. I don't want my friends to come back to me and say, gee, that really sucked. Thanks a whole lot for that unpleasant experience I went through. If you make the experience pleasant, if you create an experience that they enjoy, you will get all the referrals that you deserve. And that's a lot. That's a significant number. That alone will be an enormous boost to your marketing program. Now, on the right, you see the leap of faith, if you will. And that refers to your value proposition to clients. Your value proposition that they're perceiving, whether you know it or not, is work with me for 10, 20 years and pay my fees, and at the end of that 10 or 20 years, you'll know whether I was any good or not. You'll know whether I added value or not. And that's not a particularly attractive business model. That's not a particularly attractive offer to most people. But if you can give them a clear idea of what they want out of life and a clear idea of how to get there from here to there, they will get from you in the first 4 or 5 meetings you have with them more value than they will ever pay you for. This will be the most valuable thing they've ever done, even if the relationship ends there. And so the leap of faith, it's no longer a leap of faith. They're getting enormous value in the first few meetings.